Greetings and welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection. I'm Mike Mrowicki, State Representative from the Windham 4 District of Putney, Dummerston, and Westminster. Today's show is a show about one of the more strident issues we have to face as a town, as a state, as a nation, and as a world. We're looking today at global climate change, how it affects us here at the ground level, how it affects us across the state, across the country, and how it's affecting our world. There's no area of our lives right now that isn't touched by a changing climate. We've encountered already in Vermont a couple of storms of the century that we're still trying to dig our way out of. It stretches across the fields of human services, transportation. We're still trying to find funding for the bridge in Westminster that was destroyed. We're still trying to move people into a new state psychiatric hospital, and on it goes, the ramifications of how climate change is affecting us in every day. I was taken and really inspired recently. Last spring, we met with a group of students, part of 350 Vermont, who came to the State House, and they were holding a symposium for high school, college students. And as I was talking to one of them, this young woman said to me, you know, when people talk about climate change and that it doesn't exist, there's another term for it. And we say what they're talking about really is our future. And when you say our future doesn't matter, or you don't want to do anything to make it better, it's really hard to move past that. Well, I believe climate change is real. I believe that the younger people today should have a better future, and it's up to us to do something about it. Today we have a couple of guests who have graciously decided to spend some time with us today, who have been working locally and regionally to help address what we can do. Dr. Rebecca Jones and Paul Cameron. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
I wonder if you could introduce yourselves, each take a minute to say why you're here, what you do, and what's inspiring you to do this work.
Sure. So I'm Rebecca Jones. I'm a physician, a dermatologist here in Brattleboro. I would say that I've been interested in the environment my whole life, and I've always seen a connection between health and our environment. So it seems like a pretty easy connection to me. And I got involved with 350 and 350 Vermont, about 6 years ago now. And Paul and I have been working together since then, and I've just had far too many opportunities to get involved because, of course, it's so important, and I'm seeing more and more ways to do so, including within healthcare as well as environmentally. Have a green office, and I've done everything I can, but I've got to do more.
Now, as a dermatologist, are you seeing effects of climate change?
It's funny you ask that. In surprising ways. I mean, everyone immediately jumps to the idea that there must be more skin cancer because the sun's more intense, and that's possibly true, but we're seeing other things like Lyme disease is going up, other vector-borne illnesses or insect-borne illnesses, water-based infections, E. coli, and certain bacteria that live on the skin. We're seeing heat-related deaths, which granted isn't just dermatology, but I've experienced that with some of my patients. So yeah, we're seeing it pretty broadly and then specifically within dermatology.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for taking the time to come
my pleasure.
today. Paul, you want to introduce yourself to people who might not know you in Brattleboro and around?
Sure, I'm Paul Cameron. I'm the director of Brattleboro Climate Protection, which is a nonprofit organization that works closely with the town to reduce carbon emissions through energy efficiency, renewable energy, and transportation alternatives. And I started this back in 2002. I teamed up with Sarah Edwards, who was a legislator at the time, to found this organization. And I also serve as the town's energy coordinator, and I work with the Brattleboro Energy Committee, which is a 10-person volunteer committee appointed by the select board.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Can you tell us a little bit about defining the problem for people who might not exactly know what you're talking about? How is climate change affecting us here in Vermont?
Boy, I guess you could start local and go big in terms of, Well, I could actually start with the health summit that we had recently, connecting health and climate change. One of the things I found fascinating is that they're identifying the emotional impact of knowing that climate change is out there. People are getting depressed because of climate change.
Yeah.
So that's
This happened similarly decades ago with the nuclear threat, where they were able to mark how people were feeling with the specter of nuclear annihilation. So I'm not surprised to hear that.
It is really, I was so pleased to see that they're recognizing this phenomenon, because in my practice, I've been practicing for 25 years, and I always ask my patients, first thing, how are you doing? Yeah. And to a person, I'm seeing more and more of just this sort of sense of being overwhelmed and not knowing what to do. And granted, it's a whole slew of things, but climate change is definitely one of the factors. So people are feeling that. They're feeling the pressure of not being able to do much. There's the fact that every decision we make has an impact on climate change. So the idea of having to drive everywhere, I think a lot of Vermonters are very aware that they're stuck doing that, and they know that there's that conflict. What we eat, what we wear, there are all these choices we make that we know impact climate change.
Yeah, yeah. Now you mentioned driving. Is it accurate that if you look at our carbon footprint here in Vermont, most of our carbon footprint is due to our driving habits?
About half of it,
Which
of
is
our,
more
our
than-
emissions are from cars and trucks. So that's an issue that we'll have to address if we're going to meet our climate and energy goals. And it's difficult in a rural state. Rebecca has a lot of interesting ideas about how to do that and that she can talk about, but that's a challenge. Probably our biggest opportunity, though, is in our buildings, making them more energy efficient. And that's where we're making a lot of progress here in the town of Brattleboro and also in homes across the state. And the nice thing about that kind of work is it produces savings for individuals and businesses and towns. And that's a big source of our emissions as well. So it's probably our best opportunity there.
Now, some are saying that the low-hanging fruit's been picked already, and the next phase of what we need to do, or really part of it, is making some pretty tough decisions. As you're looking out across the town, the state, and the country, what can we be doing as next steps? Where can we get help to do it, and then where can we get help to do that?
I'm imagining that the low-hanging fruit you're referring to is the recycling and changing light bulbs, mm-hmm. the things that everybody feels like they're doing their best with and are realizing that it's just not enough. And you're right, the problem is the next steps are the collective steps, the ones that involve policy, infrastructure, shared decision-making, shared, you could say, I'm trying to think of the right word, but shared denial, shared limiting our consumption and so on. And a big part of that are the rules around building codes and also around transportation. Opportunities for walking and biking and public transportation are big next steps with big investments that have to be made.
And just going back to energy efficiency, the state has set some really ambitious goals for weatherizing homes. 80%, they want to weatherize 80,000 homes by 2020. So if we're going to do that, we really have to make an investment in energy efficiency programs like Efficiency Vermont, and whether it's the NeighborWorks Heat Squad is a local example. But we have some of the oldest, leakiest housing stock in the country. Just these big houses that are losing energy and money for their owners. So anything that we can do to tighten those homes up is going to save money and reduce emissions.
Yeah. One of the challenges to that I've experienced and heard from a lot of constituents, it can be an expensive proposition to capitalize that. Now we've tried some loan programs, and they really haven't panned out as much. And many of us are convinced that what we need is a dedicated funding source to that. Is that where carbon tax might come into the picture?
Yeah, I think so. And as you know, there's been a proposal this past week to institute a carbon pollution tax, which would require the manufacturers of fossil fuels to pay for the pollution that they're generating. And 90% of that fund that would be generated would go back to residents and businesses in the form of tax breaks, but 10% would be dedicated towards energy efficiency and clean transportation and so forth.
Yeah. How does that play out in people's everyday lives? Is the tax part of when you go fill up your car at the gas tank, when the fuel company comes and loads your fuel tank? How does that work?
My understanding is it would apply to fuel oil and gasoline. So it would be phased in over, I think, a 10-year period. So there would be a gradual increase in the gas tax and the fuel oil tax. So initially people would be paying more at the pump, for example, for gasoline, but they would be receiving tax breaks, which should offset that increase. So it's designed to be revenue neutral. And then, as I said, some of that fund that's generated would be going towards energy efficiency programs, which save money for residents.
Yeah. Along with that, it reminds me of one of the dilemmas we've run into. We all know that we want to reduce driving to reduce our carbon footprint. However, we fund maintaining that infrastructure on a tax, per gallon tax.
Yep.
What we've found is people are driving less, they're driving more efficient cars, so the funds are not adequate right now. Mm-hmm. What are other states doing when they run into that? Are you aware of that dilemma?
I don't know. It's an interesting issue. I did went to a program put on by the Department of Transportation a couple weeks ago, which said that the millennial generation, the younger generation, is driving much less than previous generations, and they're owning cars less, and they're so there's a big shift happening there that we're going to have to figure out how to deal with. And one ramification of that is that the gas tax, or the amount generated by the gas tax, is going to go down. Yeah. So we may have to find other funding sources.
Yeah, we're finding that shortfall's happening already.
Right.
Yeah, it's the problem is that we have to look at everything differently, because we've been going about all of this with a certain set of parameters, and the idea, for instance, of depending on car usage to fund roads clearly isn't going to be able to continue. You have to, there's an entity called a Peruvian Tax, which basically links things in a more logical way. So you would end up, for instance, the easiest model is with tobacco. Mm-hmm. You tax tobacco to do two things. One is reduce use, and the other is to fund the problems that occur because of tobacco. That link is critical, and one of the biggest mistakes is to take that tobacco money and use it to pave roads. Yep. So the same as with the carbon tax, or with any way of funding transportation, you have to link usage with funding in a logical way. So we have to rethink everything.
Yep. Yeah, that perspective shift is what can be difficult. Most of us are afraid of the unknown, and what we want, whether we're in business or medicine or any walk of life, we want as much certainty as we can as to how to move forward, and I think that's one of the things we're bumping up against. Back to the medical practice, you mentioned a grant that the state's just received to look more at the connections between climate change and health. Can you speak to that some more?
Sure, yeah. So the CDC has provided a grant over 4 years for the health department in Vermont to study the impacts of climate change. And there are a few major impacts that they're looking at. One is that emotional impact I mentioned, and the rate of depression and so on. There's also the vector-borne illnesses, so we're tracking Lyme disease and other co-infections, looking at both the tick population and the infections. We're looking at the waterborne illnesses. We're looking at heat-related illnesses, and then air quality, including pollen levels.
Are there problems like that in Vermont now with air quality?
There are. We are seeing the impact of the wildfires out west. We're seeing that just the fact that the spring is warmer a little earlier and fall is cooler a little later. The trees are pollinating at different times, and we're getting more pollen. And also the molds are sporulating in the fall. So we are seeing higher rates of asthma and other allergies.
As people look at what the problems are, we want to start looking at solutions. As a physician, are there things people can do now?
You know, I actually encourage more than anything else that we start thinking differently. There's a quote I love, which is, "Don't just do something, stand there." And while we're facing this big crisis, it's a little hard to say, wait, no, we have to jump in and do something. But as I mentioned before, there's so many ways we have to look at this differently that I think taking a moment to just think about what do we really want here? What sort of state do we want? What sort of country do we want? Because really it's about making connections we haven't made yet. So for instance, the health opportunities of having a transportation system that allows us to walk and bike are enormous. The opportunity to reduce carbon emissions is enormous. And there are so many other areas of the country and the world that have proven this. So to embrace a good transportation system that allows us to walk and bike would have enormous impacts. The idea of local farms and small sustainable farms is something we've already discovered as being enormously beneficial to the state. So there are opportunities like that that not only are good, they're better. They're better than what we have. So big picture opportunities like that, I think, should make everyone excited.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I got involved in this is that it's so much easier to make a difference at the local level. On the town level, you know, with an energy committee or regionally or as a state, we're really seeing progress on this issue. And I just think that's where the real action is. It's in cities and towns across the country that are working on this.
So it does make a difference for what each of us does.
It does. It makes a big
Absolutely.
difference. Yep.
I like the story of the little boy and the starfish. There was a storm, and the beach was littered with starfish. And this man's walking along, and he sees all this starfish, and up ahead of him there's a little boy running. He's throwing starfish back into the ocean. And he comes up to the little boy, and the man says, "Do you really think you're making a difference?" And he says, "For this one."
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I feel like all our actions make a difference, and I've just seen the evolution of this, of the awareness over the past 12 years.
Yeah.
You know, when I started this, there were no energy committees in the state. Now there's more than 100. We have an annual conference that attracts more than 300 people. Where there wasn't one before, and people's just consciousness has shifted, and people are talking about it, they're aware of it. It's just amazing, really, how it's changed in just a short period of time.
One of the things that I appreciate as somebody who's worked in youth and community development for decades now is we're almost speaking the same language as to what's important. It's important to have connections between people, because that makes us aware of our decisions and how they impact people. And I think what I'm hearing is that community is essential for us to figure out what's important and how to move forward. Is that somewhat of what you're saying?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, here in Vermont we still have strong communities, unlike some areas of the country, but community ties and connections are really important here. And I think that's going to make us more resilient with climate change. You know, we know how to come together after big storms like Irene and clean up and not wait for someone to do it for us. We just do it ourselves.
Those were some of the feedback we heard from National Guard people and others who came from out of state. They'd never seen a state mobilize itself. In other states, they wait for someone to come and help them, and Vermonters just dug right in, literally. If people want to get involved, can you share a little bit of what you're doing and how people might connect with what you're doing? Well, both of these, if you could
Absolutely.
give people some opportunities to how they can.
Well, Paul and I both work together. I'm a member of 350 Vermont, and so you can find us really easily online, 350vermont.org. Paul and I both work for the Energy Committee, and so you can say how to contact you, but the health department is looking for volunteers to help with things like counting Lyme disease, ticks, things like that, and they're at the health department, the Vermont Health Department.
Who's going to be who's the contact person? Is that available yet on this grant you're talking about? I'm trying to think it. You know, I'll put it up on the charts. But there are 2 researchers up there that are doing most of the work, and I know that you can certainly contact them. You can contact me too. Yeah. Okay.
At my office or website, drjonesdermatology.com. But yeah, why don't you speak to?
Well, I mentioned I work with the Brattleboro Energy Committee, and we're always looking for committed people to serve on the committee, and I think it's a lot of fun. We're getting things done, and it's a great group of people who are really smart and committed, and if you're a Brattleboro resident, I would encourage you to consider joining the committee. And you can find out more by calling me. My number is 251-8135, or my email address is pcameron@brattleboro.org.
Mm-hmm. And 350 Vermont is across the state.
350 Vermont is across the strait. 350.org is across the planet.
Yeah.
So it's a big one.
And transition similarly is.
The transition towns are any community that wants to create a transition town is encouraged to do so. Yeah.
I know Putney and Dummerston have very active transition communities and working really, standing in the same stream, doing the work together.
Yeah, I think that will be an opportunity to do so many things, because once you create those connections, it's really a lot you can do for sure. Paul has some statistics that I thought he should share, those savings from the...
Yeah, some of our biggest successes as a town have been with investing in energy efficiency. The biggest one probably is with our streetlights. Our streetlights are owned by Green Mountain Power, but a couple years ago we put together a plan for converting them to LED lights, and we Efficiency Vermont paid for the conversion, so it didn't cost the town anything. We converted all our lights, and we're now saving over $81,000 a year in reduced energy bills. So that's been a really successful project. We also replaced the lights in our parking garage, which is saving about $5,000 a year. And we put in a new boiler in our public works garage that's saving about $9,000 a year.
Is this a pellet boiler, or is this just a high efficiency? Just
a higher efficiency fuel oil boiler. There's going to be some money coming from the Vermont Yankee closing, which will help towns convert their buildings to pellets or wood chips, and schools as well. So that will be coming up in the next year. So we'll be looking at that. But there are a lot of opportunities for savings.
You said your home now, you've converted all the lights. What can a homeowner look to save?
That's a good question. So LED lights have come down dramatically, and they now have bulbs that can fit into any plain old light socket. So an LED light is 80% more efficient than an incandescent, lasts for 20 years, has great light, doesn't need to warm up the way the compact fluorescents do, no mercury in them. And I've replaced most of my bulbs at home and all of them in my office. I love them. So there's that. I bought a new efficient refrigerator. That makes a huge difference, huge difference. They're the heat pumps that are about $3,000 plus installation, I believe, and they are additive to any system you already have. But I know that they are having really great success. So those are a few little things that make a huge difference.
Yeah, heat pumps are a really exciting technology because they use about half the energy of an equivalent fuel oil boiler. They can
These are electric powered?
Electric powered. If you have solar, of course, it's being powered by renewables, which is even better. But we're going to sponsor a heat pump workshop in January for folks who are interested at the Marlboro College Graduate Center. So I encourage folks to come out and learn about that technology.
Yeah. Well, I had an energy audit this spring, and they were talking about the water heaters that are available now, the heat pumps.
Yeah.
It sounds almost too good to be true, but it is work. They do work.
They do work.
And the upfront cost is a little more. But I think, again, here's where we can change our thinking, is to look big picture, that the benefit is not just in our savings, but the fact that we are helping contribute to lessen our carbon footprint.
Yeah, it's hard right now because there's very little disposable income, and everyone's feeling strapped. But the irony is, putting a little bit more out at the beginning saves so much that the balance is just it's a clear-cut solution. And with the carbon tax, then suddenly with the rebates coming back, you have real money that you can use to invest in things that will bring even more savings. So that sort of gives the little boost that we don't have yet.
Yeah. And little old Vermont can show the way, right?
Heck yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we've led the way in so many other areas. I don't see why we can't lead the way with a carbon tax and climate change. I mean, I feel like we are leading with climate change, and I'm very proud of our state.
Yeah. Well, we've only got a few seconds left. Is there anything you'd like to share before we go? Contact information, ideas, programs coming up?
People can visit my website, which is Vermont Greenprint for Health. It's an idea about big picture solutions for health and climate change. And you can reach me at my office, 802-251-0958, and at drjonesdermatology.com.
Great.
And again, my number is 251-8135 or pcameron@brattleboro.org. And if anyone is interested in, working on energy and climate projects locally, give me a call.
Yeah. Now, there had been some regular meetings going on with 350 Vermont locally. Is that still happening?
We're mainly focusing in Montpelier and Burlington, and mainly because there's so much going on with the pipeline. Yeah. So there's a lot of energy up there trying to keep it out of northern Vermont. We had an amazing showing at the March in New York City. We had 3,000 Vermonters. We had, 12 buses go, funded by Ben & Jerry's. Yeah. Thank you, Ben & Jerry's. Yeah. So that, I think we showed the rest of the country that we're committed.
Great. Well, thanks so much again
Thank you, Mike.
for taking your time.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks for your work, and onward.
Likewise.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you. And thanks again to the people here at BCTV. I want to thank Jeff and Roland especially today. They do such a great job of helping us to bring this information to you and help share the work that's being done locally and give opportunities where you might be able to help as well. Until next time, this is Mike Mrowicki, and thanks a lot for watching.